Hello there, this is Steve here in Sydney on the lay gnosis website truebluehealer.com. That's where in just 20 minutes you can get physical evidence that something has changed in your favour, and you'll get some remarkable intuitions in the next few days and weeks that ultimately become a mentoring internal voice. Physical evidence is immediately presented in just 20 minutes. You just do the beginner's tour. It is completely free and long-lasting. And you'll find that there's a lot more to the rumour of the divine spark than you ever believed. So it's a wonderful free adventure you can do, and I always say, whatever you can get for free off the internet, grab it, okay? All questions will be answered, okay? The video today is about the daily administration of poison to our Western society through its media, and that is the long-term slow poison of political correctness. It's a very serious matter. I mean, a lot of natural things are poisoned, but you can live with them because you keep getting rid of them. But in terms of media brainwashing, people have been slowly hypnotised into not believing certain things, which is absolute idiocy. And one of them is to make people racially blind so that race no longer plays a role in our decision making and our take on a given situation. I first noticed political correctness in the 1970s, where academics kept telling us, and the chattering classes, who are all products of the academic education system, started telling us that it's evil to say anything about race because it marginalises and hurts people's feelings, etc. And I've lived through a period of some 40 years of politically correctness programming, and I can only say now that the end phase of this daily poisoning of every citizen in the Western world is reaching its objective, its terminal phase, and that is the destruction of Western civilization. Pictured on the left here, I have how the poison is delivered. It's the Murdoch Press headline, where one of our sporting stars, an Olympic athlete, dressed up at a party with boot polish on her face, and the completely politically correct social and public media are literally stoning her to death. Okay? We are just as barbaric, really, as nearly as barbaric as the most radical Muslims, okay? Not much better than ISIS are we socially, okay? Now, this is an example where you can't, you know, on all the commentary about this picture, she is demonised with the boot polish on her face. The white woman next to her, who is actually lampooning white people, doesn't get a mention. So apparently, racism is a one-way thing, and it's always practiced by evil white people. Basically always designating white people as the enemy in every case. And everyone else is a poor suffering victim of white man's viciousness to all other races. Well, that's absolutely false. But the poison is mounting, and it's got to the point where in Europe now, Europe is collapsing under the burden of race blindness. The media is covering up, refusing to print the fact that the 80% increase in crime all over Europe is caused by people of certain races from outside Europe. They can't bring themselves to print the R word. One thing I will say is there's another word too out of political correctness, the M word, the word Muslim. All of these people committing these crimes are Muslims, whether you like it or not. And there's often a politically correct argument that people use when they're fencing about this matter all over the internet, that Islam's not a race, so get your facts straight. Well, I would correct that silly person by saying, read up a little bit on Islam and realise how Islam itself has bred its own race of inbred cousin-married individuals for 1400 years with 20 times the normal birth defects that Western people have. Okay, 20 times the crime rate. And they're filling the institutions of the Western world with their handicapped, useless people who will just be a drain on state resources. Sweden might be the first country to collapse. It's going to be like a domino thing, as it's just come to the fore that last year's intake of Muslim migrants who are never going to earn anything and need cradle-to-grave support from the marvellous Swedish social system. The cost of supporting 1 year's intake is going to cost some 14 times the Swedish defence budget, which of course is unsustainable. And there I'm using one of the words used by all the greenies, the communists, the politically correct people. Something's unsustainable, it's evil. Well, let's see them put a stop to this mass Muslim immigration of people who can't use toilets, can't be educated and can't read and write and will never be employed. Why would you ever bring these people, these useless people, into sparkling Europe? I mean, really, Sweden and its marvellous achievements, with a higher living standard than the United States of America, for goodness sake, their system was made totally by their own indigenous groups. They were remarkably monocultural. The indigenous white race living there since before the Ice Age. Now, the fact that Sweden had it so good and now it's got so bad with the addition of just about 1 million migrants means mixing people together is a disaster. Okay, and you're seeing that disaster unfold today in Europe, and mainstream media is not reporting it. Murdoch media still putting this tripe about people putting boot polish on their faces on the front page of newspapers, and of course this tits and bums on the fourth page in the Murdoch press. Now I'll tell you something you probably don't know. Rupert Murdoch, who owns all these newspapers, feeding you all this soporific tripe, he's a raving Zionist. It is rumoured that his mother's Jewish, but he's a total raving Zionist, and they believe in only one thing: the destruction of Western civilization, according to Winston Churchill in 1920. Now, what do you know about Winston Churchill? Well, he was philo-Semitic. He loved Jewish people. He grew up in the rich Jewish quarter of London. He married into a rich banking family, a Jewish banking family. This gave him the insight to utterly condemn Zionists, who are a small proportion of Judaic people who seek only the destruction of every brick of civilization they can find. Rupert Murdoch is part of that with his newspapers, blinding you to the fact that you've been slowly poisoned over 40 or 50 years by the poison of political correctness. One of the problems we have is that Western life has been so successful that we've all gone to sleep. It's so wonderful enjoying all the wonderful pastimes that we have available to us, more than we can ever do in our own single lifetime. So we tend to be off our guard and busy enjoying ourselves perhaps too much. So I'll tell you something that I remember that you may not if you're a young person, and you should be listening to this if you're a young person. I never thought I would see the day when the Soviet Union, the mighty Soviet Empire that threatened America continuously, I never thought I'd see the day when that empire literally vanished before my eyes. Even the CIA were caught napping. Can you believe it? The CIA said the Soviet Union will collapse in the 1970s. I remember reading about it. 1988, the Berlin Wall was taken down, and the CIA, the new generation of people in control, read about it in the newspapers. They found out about it last, after we all watched it on television, you see. But I never thought I would see the collapse of a giant military-industrial complex empire. 70% of its economy was devoted to military spending, and that was their demise. It was truly and totally an economic demise, unsustainable spending. Okay? Now, you're going to see the same thing happen to Europe. Uncontrolled spending, not on the military, but on keeping useless, trash, third world people, an inbred group of people who will never get jobs, cannot be educated, can't pass school exams, can't use toilets, can't read and write. Importing millions of them into Europe is will cause the collapse of the European Empire, just like it did the Soviet. In case you don't know, political correctness was part of what came out of cultural Marxism in the 1920s from the Frankfurt Institute. And that was another way of conquering the world by communists whose Marxist theories utterly failed. The working classes, as predicted by Karl Marx, did not rise up in World War I and slaughter the elites of their own companies and civilizations. They did the same old thing. They died in the millions fighting the working classes of other nations. Okay, so Karl Marx was totally wrong, and Marxism was reinvented as cultural Marxism. Feminism is part of that. Can I tell you where feminism came from? It was first put to good use in 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution, and it was used to destroy the family values of the still heavily dominant Tsarist regime, which was strongly based on the foundation of the family. Feminism, setting woman against man, and immorality, perversion and homosexuality was promoted by the 80% Jewish instigators of the Bolshevik Revolution, Marxists, okay? The same old bad guys keep turning up right through history. They're a race of people who inbreed themselves to always be in the attack mode against the governing majority in their host countries, okay? Judaic people breed themselves, selecting that for their own trait. The favourite trait they want is fake tameness, basically. And they do that to blend in while maintaining feral ferociousness toward all other races. Now, if you think the world's a crazy place, that's only half of it. There's another group of people who mirror precisely what Talmudic Jews do. That is the Wahhabis. They want to destroy the world too and believe only themselves should be allowed to live on planet Earth. 0.1% Wahhabi people are on this planet, and they also believe that everyone else will and should be eradicated sooner or later, inshallah, by the will of God, you see. They believe that. It's often been said by analysts that there's a mysterious similarity between the Wahhabi families of Saudi Arabia and Israel, that their animosity toward each other is only public. Internally, it seems there have been Jewish inputs to the Wahhabi religion. Israel actually get on very well with Saudi Arabia privately. So there's two groups in the world that want to destroy the whole human race. Basically because neither group can live with other host groups. They can never integrate. It's impossible for them, okay? And Rupert Murdoch is one of these people, and he's putting you all to sleep with his political correctness on the front page of every newspaper, telling you, never think about race, it's an R word. Now, can I just talk about the R word and race for a minute? Racism. There, I said it and I wasn't struck by lightning. Can you believe it? Racism is a completely natural human thing. It's bred into us by evolution. I cannot think of a racism-free century in our history. I can't think of one. Not even a decade of anywhere that was racism-free. There's no non-racist civilization ever been dug up anywhere. I can't think of one. So basically racism, and both sides of it, because it works both ways, it's a two-sided coin very much. Racism is obviously needed for our development. It's Mother Nature seems to be betting both ways, that it'll maintain the cohesiveness of a particular indigenous group, while some of its members will outbreed to other groups of people, probably adding to the useful genome of another group. But that's not always the case. If you've got some people who are deliberately inbred themselves, marrying their cousins for 1400 years, they have downgraded their genome, making their own genome unsuitable to be mixed with other people, okay? Racism in people is undoubtedly genetically endowed in us, put there in our DNA by the agency of evolution, And I was very surprised when I married a black Muslim woman, and of all people, my dad had a shouting match with me in the backyard. And all I did was say, well, Dad, that's thanks for telling me your opinion, but nothing's going to change. So that's a case of my having a preference for people different to myself. Now, racism is having a dislike of people different to yourself. There's a sprinkling of both types of people in every race. So racism is a both-way bet by Mother Nature, and it's not something we should try and hypnotise ourselves to be blind to, which is what the political correctness is forever trying to do. Tranquilises, hypnotises into believing that races don't exist. If that were really true, Barbara Lerner Spectre wouldn't be dumping millions of unsuitable Muslim people into Sweden, would she? If it didn't really make any difference to a society, she wouldn't be destroying Sweden the way she is, would she? Action speaks louder than words. There's a documentary I've already put into the playlist connected to this video. I'll put a link to it underneath this video in the chat column. The documentary is about the Race Relations Commissioner of London, a black man who was highly educated, obviously, been to university, got all the loopy left-wing training, and he calls himself, in the first 3 minutes of the documentary, I was the enforcer of race relations. I was going to stamp out the R word completely. Anyway, after 10 years' experience in this documentary, he explains to you how profoundly wrong he has been. The penny started to drop midway through his tenure. And he shows you why. He said, all we've really done by forbidding people to make racist remarks is to stop us talking about some very serious matters. And the facts of reality. And he pulls up a map of London and he says, the two Jewish suburbs are here and there. This is the Pakistani suburb. This is the French Quarter. I'm joking about that. A few white people still live here in London over here, right? But he said the overall lesson is that people, no matter what you make them say, still think racially, and they segregate themselves. Even in the city of London, they do not integrate. They don't live next door to each other. They enjoy the company of their own kind. So that's the Race Relations Commissioner who was going to absolutely abolish the term race from our vocabulary. He's done a complete about turn. At least he's on the BBC admitting it, cap in hand. The show doesn't end very well because it ends with still trying to support. And British documentaries always seem to end with the opposite theme in the last 2 minutes. And they got some politically correct school teachers saying that actually Somali kids with an IQ of 67 are actually doing a lot better than white kids now in Birmingham. And that's the hope of the Race Relations Commissioner at the end of the show. As usual, it's a backflip on the whole theme of the show, put in the end to make it look balanced or something, or academic fancy journalism. In fact, it's utter BS. The Somali kids don't do better. They have 3 times the mental illness of the rest of the world and the lowest IQs on the planet, 67, and they form the most street gangs in London. Okay? So, that's called reality, and I think you should start calling yourself maybe a factor file or reality file, a real file. How about that? That's a new word got to get into the lexicon. We need a word for someone who's interested in reality, facts and statistics rather than what we would like people to be or what the academics would like everybody to be. A politically correct song, which was quite wrong, said 20, 30 years ago, mixed up people or something and we'll all breed together, a little bit of black man, a little bit of white man, a little bit of Indian blood and we all live together in the great melting pot or something, mixed with yellow chinky. Do you remember that song? Well, it's complete hogwash. People prefer the company of their own kind and they generally don't interbreed in the map of London as shown in the BBC documentary by the Race Relations Commissioner himself. So that's cold hard reality, removing much of the dialogue from the superior academic fools who got their degrees elevating themselves above everybody else. Now, this elevation of academic self-delusion is going to be punctured soon by a horrifying price signal from the cost of looking after people who will never be able to get a job. A group of people, the Muslims, who put out handicapped people 20 times more than white civilization. That's going to puncture the politically correct balloon, the delusional balloon that they've erected in their own stupid heads. How long it will take to burst the balloon, I don't know, but facts and reality have a way of knocking on your door. Okay, when your daughter gets raped, when you get attacked in your home just to get the telephone off you so they can sell it in the pawn shop between dole payments, that sort of thing. When that happens, that's got a way of nullifying all the political correctness. Okay, I'm hoping this will come to the rescue of the European civilization and prevent it collapsing before our very eyes like the Soviet civilization did so ignominiously.